What happens when the very person meant to love and protect you becomes the source of your deepest wounds? Pi Venus Winslow shares her powerful journey of transformation after being raised by a malignant narcissist mother and how she helps others reclaim their power, authenticity, and freedom. Welcome to Happiness on Tap podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and practical insights for a happier, more fulfilling life. I'm your host, Leann Herron, and today I am joined by the incredible Pi Venus Winslow, a published author, transformational life coach, and survivor turned thriver. For 45 years, she lived under the shadow of a malignant narcissist parent, enduring the emotional and psychological effects that left her struggling with low self esteem, codependency, and self sabotage. Through her courageous healing journey, she has broken free from the cycle of victimhood and now lives intentionally, authentically, and joyfully. Today, she empowers others to step out of the grip of narcissistic abuse, reclaim their self worth, and create a life filled with freedom and purpose. This conversation is a must listen for anyone navigating the aftermath of a narcissistic relationship or searching for hope and tools to step into their power. Let's welcome Pi Venus Winslow to the show. It is so wonderful to have you join us today.
Thank you, Leann. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too.
So let's get started. Can you share what it was like growing up with a malignant narcissistic mother and how that shaped your early life?
Yes, I will absolutely share that. First off, I'm going to say, though, I didn't realize my mother was a narcissist until my mid 40s. So to understand what it's like to grow up with a narcissistic parent, I think it just starts with recognizing that something's not right. You feel something is off, but it's normal. This is normal everyday stuff. So, and I think that's kind of the gist and the hook is that, for people who grow up with a narcissistic parent, they really don't, they can't even comprehend or fathom the extent of the damage of this like undercurrent of abuse that they're experiencing day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. So my father was an alcoholic. I could tell. I mean, I figured that out, by the time I became a teenager because I could see him drinking. But my mother, I didn't know what the heck was the deal with my mom. I knew she wasn't right. I knew there was something off, but there was no name for it, and I couldn't put my finger on it again because it's normal, but also because I was always left questioning that feeling because whenever it came up, she would tell me I was overreacting, I was too sensitive, and it was all me. I was the crazy one. So all narcissists have a sense of entitlement, whether they're grandiose or whether they're covert. They really do believe that they deserve and are entitled to whatever it is that they want. So my mother exhibited that throughout my childhood. She was entitled to whatever it was that she wanted. And she would do whatever it took to get that, regardless of how it impacted other people. So she didn't have any empathy. She didn't have any remorse. And she had this Jekyll and Hyde quality about her where when around other people, she put on this show that made her look like this wonderful person. But then behind the scenes, she was awful and she would do everything that she could to squash me, like put it, instilling self-doubt. She was on me at 10 years old about my weight and being overweight and being fat, telling me I would never be able to achieve my dreams because, I was a pudgy little 10-year-old, like just starting to go through puberty. She did everything that she could to keep me in my place, so I didn't try to shine too bright and take the attention off of her. And she just demanded this emotional energy all of the time. And if she didn't get what she wanted, which was, a lot of adoration, a lot of, you're so smart, you're so beautiful, you're so wonderful. If I wasn't buying into that game, then there was the punishments, the attacks, for non-compliance, because narcissists need that supply. They need that outside emotional validation because they really are a shell of a person on the inside. They really cannot generate their own um, self-worth or self-esteem. So they live in this delusion that they're all that, but they need other people to show them they're all that because it's just really fragile inside of them. And I think growing up with somebody who, was cruel and had no empathy, no remorse, no accountability, that was a huge one. No accountability for her behavior. Everything was justified. And so um, it was very hard for me to learn, with this being normal, it was very hard for me to learn these things as well. Like how to be accountable for my behavior. Since my mother was never accountable for hers, I didn't learn how to be accountable for mine. And you know, I also struggled, and this is what's interesting, I think, about codependency and narcissism. They're so similar in a lot of ways that I also needed external validation, that I couldn't really develop a sense of myself because I was constantly trying to be the person my mother wanted me to be so that I could connect with her and receive the love and care that I needed as a child. So it's very confusing for somebody who grows up with a narcissistic parent. It's very complex.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm kind of wondering if we were sisters and we just don't remember each other. Um, I lived a very, very, very similar life. Father was an alcoholic, mother was a narcissist. Um, and like you, didn't really realize that there was a term for it that kind of described who she was, the behaviors. I also had the shame of my weight. Um, my mother used to make me wear a girdle under my clothes in elementary school and middle school because I was always the chubbier kid in the group. I think I remember middle school maybe being like a size 10 where all my friends were like a size 1 or 2. And, just having this horrible shame about it and not wanting to go to gym so that none of my friends would see that I was, wearing a girdle under my clothes, or even girls who weren't friends, because kids are cruel. And um, I also had, I was never told that I could be anything other than a wife and a mother. Like that was how I was born, bred, and raised. It was never, "Oh, you can go to college, you can be anything you want, you can, do it." And then when I would have an idea of something that I wanted to be when I grew up, boy, she would not only be the one to squish it, she would bring in friends that would help
Mm,
squish my ideas.
yeah. Yeah.
And, hearing it from you, um, just makes it clear that, it is something that is very common. These people do exist in everyday life.
Mhm.
Um, my mom was very violent. She was
Mm,
very physically abusive. It wasn't just emotional and mental, but very physically abusive as well. And then their marriage was just in turmoil all the time, lack of trust, accusing each other of affairs. Money would go missing in the house. Who took the money? Was it my dad for his drinking, or was it me and my brother who were teenagers? So there was always punishment at the end. It didn't matter. But like you said, she was always looking for that validation from her friends,
mhm.
from the church, from the school, from the neighbors. She was this great woman, this great mother, this great woman involved in the church. But boy, behind closed doors, that was a whole nother situation.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't until like maybe high school when, my brother and I, siblings go through crazy things and we started getting very violent with each other.
Mm.
And we would get into these fights and they would, roll out into the front yard and then the neighbors would see or whatever would happen. But there was one time when I got caught sneaking out with my friends. And to teach me a lesson and to make sure it never happened again, she beat me in front of my friends.
Oh,
The
wow.
and the neighbors saw it, all
Mm.
their parents all witnessed it. And they couldn't believe that this was happening, although no one did anything.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
never a report filed, child services never showed up. Like you said, no accountability, no empathy, and no remorse.
Yeah. 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 I'm so sorry that happened to you, Leanne. I'm sorry it happened to me. I'm sorry it has happened to a lot of people and continues to happen. But I think I want to say thank you for doing this podcast just to have this conversation so that other people out there don't think that they're crazy because that's all part of the cycle. That's all part of the system is for you to be wondering, am I the bad guy here? Because this person is reacting this way. And that was one of the things that I really had to change to start getting my life to start working better for me and for me to start feeling better about myself was to learn that that's not normal healthy behavior and that whatever my behavior was a reaction in response to what I was experiencing growing up. And it's actually normal. They're normal reactions. They're part of those survival strategies, the fight, flight, freeze and fawn. That's all, those are kind of pre-programmed into our lizard brain. So that's what happens when we're in those moments of panic and terror because, our 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 life is blowing up. And that's literally what it feels like when you're a child and your parent is, you know, out of control. You believe your life is in danger because you need your parent to survive. And that's also like programmed in us. And it's very strong. It is so strong that that need for attachment to a parent will override anything that we suffer. Any kind of abuse, we will continue to keep that loyalty to our parents until we recognize that for what it is and we start to detach from the loyalty to our abusers.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of people-pleasing behavior, anything to, keep the peace, walking on eggshells, constantly in fear of people on the outside finding out about it, and then me being punished if they did, even if it maybe didn't come from me, but that
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
it was a lifetime of that, and it got worse. after my parents divorced, because I was just starting high school. I was actually in 8th grade, I guess, and my brother was a senior. She got worse, much worse with him out of the house. And he certainly was not around or in any state to protect us or to step in or to do anything about it. He was still living in his own level of fear of her if he
Hmm.
did do anything.
Yeah.
Um, and, so I got pregnant young. I got pregnant at 17. It
Mhm.
certainly wasn't planned, but had I had a parent that cared for me and had those parental conversations, had taken me to a doctor, had started talking about sex education, whatever the case may be, it may not have happened so young,
Mhm.
but because I didn't know and because I was seeking that attention
Mhm.
from people who made me feel safe, who made me feel wanted, who made me feel beautiful, who didn't make me feel fat.
Right.
Um, you know, no surprise, I got pregnant so young, and I used that as my door to get out. Like,
Mhm.
as fast as my little feet would take me, and I remember the day we sat down with her and told her that I was pregnant and that we were going to get an apartment together and look at getting married. Right away, she's like, "Oh, no, no. You don't need to get married. You don't need to marry him. You can just stay here and I'll help you raise your child." And, you know, um, I didn't listen.
Thank
Um,
goodness.
that ended up kind of good and bad, but I did get out. Um, we did end up moving away. Um, and my daughter was a year and I had to go back home.
Mm.
The marriage ended, it was bad, and I ended up back home and it was right back to the same old. Like nothing had changed. The control, the abuse, the crazy, it was still very much there. I got out again. 4 years later, married my second husband. And that's when her crazy hit max capacity.
Mm.
Like, in my little start where you think, like I said, that the people that are supposed to love you and protect you are the ones that cause the deepest wound. Um, I never imagined what degree of crazy she could go.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times you don't until you get out of it, and then once you've got some time to kind of decompress, process, and like calm your nervous system, then you can look at it and go, oh my God, what was that? It's like that old adage of the frog in the boiling water. You just don't know the level of crazy that you're in until you get out of it. And you in a sense are kind of boiled alive because you just don't know. You don't know what you're experiencing and you don't know how it's really impacting you. That's one of the things when I was a teenager, I knew things were happening that were bad. But it was a surface level knowing. It's just like I know this is really bad and I know that I should, it you remember, Leanne, we grew up with the after school specials and the sitcoms that would have that very special episode where they would talk about family issues and
Mhm.
controversial things like that. So, on a sense, on some level, I'm like, okay, I know this is really bad and it's probably it's supposed to be devastating my life, but I'm not devastated. I don't feel devastated. I don't feel, I don't feel anything because I've had to learn how to not let this bother me
Mhm.
so I could just keep trudging on. And it wasn't until my mid 40s when I finally kind of figured out what the deal was with my mother that I had the insight. It was like the biggest aha moment of my life where I was like, "Oh my God. I can see now how this impacted me. I mean, what you were talking about, the way, the impact it has. I mean, the list is huge. The list is huge, but there's so much fear, that inadequacy, the imposter syndrome, the fear of other people judging you, the fear of being rejected, the fear of speaking up and speaking up, saying the truth, the trust issues, you know, um, the low self-esteem, the self-loathing, the risky behaviors, the lack of self-value and self-worth, either overwhelming emotions or no emotions at all, right? Um, the same for me, the same inappropriate behavior, and the reactions that are out of proportion to what's actually happening because that's what was modeled for me. And the shame, there's so much shame, right? Shame for existing, for even being alive and breathing air, taking up space, let alone, all of the problems that I'm causing, my parents because they have to take care of me or give me attention. Oh my gosh. And, heaven forbid that I bring any attention, negative attention onto the family because there was these secrets and these lies. We just didn't talk about my father's drinking, and we didn't talk about, the things that were going on with my mother in our family. So being afraid all the time, tiptoeing around for a fear of conflict, a fear not being good enough. There are so many things there's so many ways it impacts a person. And for me, the constant message that I was a burden, that I was unlovable, that I was unwanted, just like you, Leann. I'm out there as soon as I'm a teenager and I can get out into the world a little bit. I'm walking around like, love me, anybody, you know? Um, risky behavior, bad choices, put myself in a lot of I'm lucky to be alive. Some of the things that I did, I look back now and I just think, girl, you're lucky that you're not in a, you weren't killed and thrown in a ditch somewhere or, sold off in a sex trafficking circle or, abducted or, but not valuing myself because my own parents didn't value me, right? So there's this underlying belief that I'm not worthy. So I'm going to do everything I can to show anybody who's giving me the slightest bit of attention, you know, I'm worthy of love. So I'm going to do anything that I can. And and so again, it's almost like I even put another layer of trauma on top of myself through my own behavior and choices because the way I was raised and what I believed about myself.
Yeah, I can relate to every piece of that. Every piece of it. Yep. Risky behavior, bad choices. Um,
Alcohol, drug abuse,
oh yeah.
and not knowing what healthy relationships were. I mean, it was normal. So if I'm dating a guy and he's treating me like crap, I'm like, okay, I know how to handle this. I'll just try harder. Like I did with my parents, and maybe, just maybe, I'll
Oh
get
yeah.
it right this time and I'll get what I need. So again, it's like when when somebody who grows up with a narcissistic parent starts seeing these things and starts kind of putting it together, here's what I want to say if you're listening. It's not you and you're not crazy. But this is a problem that you have. You didn't ask for this problem. You didn't deserve this, but it's your It's your responsibility, and I don't say responsibility in a bad way. It's your ability to respond. You have the ability to respond to what happened to you as a child, your childhood trauma, and you can take that, you can face it, take it by the horns, so to speak, and work through it and come out the other side transformed in a different person, meaning that you no longer believe all of the lies and the things that were taught to you growing up day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. It takes time and consistency to change that, but it can be done. But but recognizing that it's been normalized for you, I think really is the first step. And once you see that and you see there is another way, because I knew at that time when I was in those bad relationships, when I was reenacting my childhood in adult relationships over and over again, I would see other people, I'd see other families, I'd see other couples. I'd be like, they're so nice to each other. Like my parents, my mother would never do that for me. Or my boyfriend would never be that nice to me or treat me that good. But other people had that. So I knew there was something else. I just didn't know how to get that. But the reason I couldn't get it is because I didn't believe I deserved it, because I stayed in those kinds of relationships, dug, like my friend says, I was dug in like an Alabama tick. I'm like, I'm gonna make this work. I'm gonna make this person love me if it's the last thing I do. Instead of recognizing this is not a healthy person and I'm not healthy for staying here and trying to make this work. But again, it's that loyalty to the perpetrator. And so these are all things I had to learn. I didn't understand what that was. I had no concept of what that was until I learned it. And then once I started learning things, I saw an opportunity for me to start changing myself. And that's when my life started to change. I had to change myself first from the inside out.
And that for you, you were saying happened in your mid 40s?
Mid 40s, like half my life is over when it hit me like a ton of bricks. But that was good because there was an urgency there for me to not make this um just like a hobby, right? It was like I'm like, holy crap. If I don't change myself now and take this seriously, it will happen again and again and again. And I will blow up my life. I will end up heartbroken, sobbing on the bathroom floor once again, my life crumbling around me, and realizing here I am again. Here I am again. When will this ever end? Well, it never will end unless I do something about it. So that was, my Scarlett O'Hara moment. As God is my witness, I will never do this to myself again. That was actually maybe the first moment I realized that I was no longer going to self-abandon. But I didn't even know what that meant at the time. But it was that moment where I was like, I am not going to I'm not going to allow this to happen to myself anymore because I can just see now how it's happened and played out over and over and over again. Those patterns. It's like, but see, and a lot of people talk to me and say the same thing. Like I said to myself on my journey, I can't believe I didn't see this sooner. I can't believe I didn't figure this out sooner. Well, you can't figure it out. You can't figure out a pattern until it becomes a pattern. So you have to do the pattern, to see the pattern, to change the pattern. So if that's any comfort to anybody here, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, wherever you are on your journey of healing. And if you take it seriously enough, if you commit to yourself and you do what needs to be done to get well, you will get well. But the problem is that we keep going back to that old belief that what's the point? I'm not worth it. I'll never win. This is too hard. And we can't accept that because I think when you really start to see how bad it's impacted your life, if you can remind yourself on a regular basis of that, it gets easier to keep pushing forward and to do the work that needs to be done. The deep excavation of like figuring out what the heck happened to me that made me this way. And is this really me, or is this just a product of my childhood programming and trauma responses? I, I could change that. If you're aware of it, you can change it. But we've got to become aware of it first. And that's hard. That's a hard part.
Yeah, absolutely. And you covered so many things in that that are so valuable for people to hear. They're not alone. They're not broken. They're at a season or a time in their life, whether they're still in it or they've just gotten out of it and they're starting their healing journey. It's all part of the journey.
Mhm.
As I'm sitting here thinking, when you said early 40s or mid 40s, tomorrow I will be 54. Exactly 10 years ago is when I got out of a 20-year abusive marriage.
Mm.
And I did all those things. I did that. Well, if I lose weight, he'll love me. If I do this, he'll love me. If, you know, everything and anything I could possibly do to continue to hang on for dear life, regardless of how bad it was, how damaging it was, not only for me, but for my children. And I put them in that position.
Mm.
And, but I stayed because it goes back to those beliefs that we bring into our current time. And for me, that was you never leave. You don't leave the marriage, you stay in it.
Mhm.
Because that's what I watched my aunts and my uncles and my cousins and, everybody stayed forever. But then I also got to see what it looked like when it ended, like when my dad and my mom got divorced. And I couldn't see that that was a good thing. So I was like, okay, if I stay, at least it's normal for me. I'm used to it. What we get used to is horrible.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I was also carrying into it, the only sign that I really have of what it looked like to leave
Right.
and
Right.
seeing how, much worse my mom became when my dad left, how much worse it was for us as kids when my dad left.
Mhm.
So I still carried a lot of that fear about leaving.
Yeah.
But when the fear of staying exceeded the fear of leaving, when it became life or death,
Mhm.
the fear of leaving was a lot less. It was like, okay, I'm out. Like, I'm just out. And
Yeah.
I, packed up and I left, and nobody knew where I was or how to find me. I mean, I wasn't necessarily hiding. Like, still today, I have the same phone number that I've had for the last 25 years. Um, and now that, I'm a coach and my name is on my business, they can
Mhm.
find me if they want to find me.
Yeah.
Um, but what I did do after I left was I spent 3 years not dating, just learning how to love myself,
Mhm.
learning
Yeah.
what that meant. And it was not only that, but it was finding my own identity because I,
Mhm.
I didn't have an identity. And I was going to ask you if you went through that as well.
Mhm.
I had the identity of a wife and a mom,
Mhm.
but now my kids were grown. I was living alone for the first time in my life, and I had no idea who I was.
Mhm. Yeah, and I hear that a lot from people who have experienced narcissistic abuse because they do. They self-abandon. We self-abandon to keep the relationship alive. But we don't even realize we're self-abandoning, right? And so when somebody says, "Well, tell me about yourself. What do you like or what do you want?" We're like, "We don't know." We're speechless. We're like, "What?" Well, I always like the thing they like, or I always do the thing they do, and so this process that you talk about where you just took some time to focus on yourself, I mean, we all need to do that. It's not that we can't be in a relationship while we do it, but we've got to detach from other people to find ourselves. And detaching doesn't mean leaving. It just means that we lessen the importance that we put on other people to focus a little more on ourselves. That doesn't mean that we don't take our roles, our duties, our responsibilities into account. We do, and we do need to show up for our commitments and obligations, but taking time where we were just focusing on ourselves and asking ourselves these kinds of questions. Well, what are my values? What do I value? And am I demonstrating that value in my day-to-day life? If I say, well, I value honesty, am I being honest with myself, with other people, or am I lying to myself and telling myself a story that I have a good relationship when we're fighting all of the time? Or, it's like these are really hard things. And I think, there are different ways you can go about doing it. Like you said, kind of, like the pulling back and really focusing on yourself. It can take a long time. It could take a short amount of time, but I think having somebody to support you and kind of help you ask yourself these questions and guide you through this process is the most important thing to getting well, because we have so many blind spots and we have this story about ourselves, and human beings have this tendency to want to prove what they believe is true. So somebody might say, well, they might offer something and then we'll be like, no, no, no. See, it's different because of this or that or something else, but we don't realize that's our story, and unless somebody is like kind of pointing things out to us or pointing out our patterns that we don't even notice. Like, I notice that you say you're sorry all the time,
All the
right?
time.
I do. Yes. Everything that comes out of your mouth is like sorry and then something else, right? And it's like, oh, we need other people to reflect back to us what they're really seeing, not in a mean or judgmental way, but in an honest way, because they want us to grow and, heal. And we've got to be willing to hear the things that might hurt or be uncomfortable to change. And that was really hard too, because my mother was a narcissist and she couldn't handle any criticism, neither could I, because that's all I got from my mother all day long was criticism. So whenever anybody else tried to give me honest feedback, I took it so personally that I couldn't even hear it. So I had to learn how to remember. I had to train myself to remember, once I knew this is a trustworthy person, be it a therapist, a coach, or a close friend, this person cares about me and they're telling me this not to hurt me or break me down like my mother did. They're telling me this because they love me and they're trying to help me. And if I want to help myself, maybe I should give this my attention and not blindly buy into it, but question, is there some truth to what this person is saying? And if so, maybe this is something that I want to look at and address. But for me, part of my healing journey, and tell me, Leann, if this is true for you too, one extreme to the other. I'm either all bad or I've got it all together, or this person doesn't know what they're talking about, but everything this person says is true. And it's just one extreme. I'm either great or I'm a piece of crap. Um, I saw this pattern in myself in so many places. Like even simple things, like I either have to finish, if I'm going to read the book, I have to finish it. I can't stop reading it. I have to keep, like, the simplest things. Like I have to go vegan. I can't just try it. It was just so extreme. And I was like, and other people would like make a suggestion. I'd be like, what? You could do that? You could just, if you don't like the book you're reading, you can just stop. Or you could try to be a vegan for a couple weeks and see if you like it. I just, there were just so many things that I couldn't wrap my head around. The simplest things, like, oh, it's okay for me to change my mind. That was a weapon used against me, right? So there were a lot of things I had to unlearn, a lot of things I needed to learn, and a lot of things I needed to unlearn. And I would say they're both equally valuable, but I had to unlearn first before I could learn. And I think that's probably what keeps a lot of people stuck, is that they think they can just learn a lot about narcissism and they're going to get well. But they're not going to get well because we've got to unlearn things to create the space to fill it with something new and more accurate. And that's better for us.
Yeah, I definitely was the same way. It was all or nothing and very extreme. When I threw myself into that diet rabbit hole, if I lose weight, he'll love me. I went extreme, like very extreme. Um, the extreme calorie restriction, the extreme exercise regimen, but it was at that last 6 months before I got out of the marriage. It was kind of like in the ultimatum period, which let me tell you, just never works. So don't even try it. But, I just figured like nobody even cares if I'm home or not home. So I'm going to join a gym. And the gym that I joined happened to be a 24-hour gym. So that was wonderful. I could get up in the middle of the night and go to the gym and work out for hours. And I went from like 225 pounds to 147 pounds. Just
Wow.
extreme. And I thought I was doing everything the right way because I was working, on a program that taught me the right way to eat. I was eating a completely healthy. Um, but even then, too much of a good thing is a bad thing.
Right.
I was overdosing on greens. So I would like juice in the morning and then I would have a salad at lunch and then I would have a salad with my dinner and it ended up causing more physical problems because of the amount of oxalates I was ingesting with the juicing. So then having to figure that out. But yeah, it was always either like 100 miles an hour, foot on the gas.
Hmm.
And now, within the last year of working with the nutritionist, I took her all my ledgers and my journals and I showed her, oh, I've done this before. I can do this again. And she's like, oh, no, you're not. No, no, you're not. We are not going to do the extreme calorie restriction, the extreme exercise. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do the extreme exercise because for me, that was my escape out of the house.
Yeah.
And in the relationship that I'm in now with my amazing, loving, kind, caring, compassionate, amazing husband, I don't want to escape the house. And he has been that person for me, like you said. I remember very early in our relationship him saying, "You don't need to apologize every time you open your mouth." The simplest of thing, like, "Oh, I forgot to, fill the water pitcher after I emptied it." It was an immediate, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That won't happen again. That won't happen again." And then you become hyper vigilant and make sure it never happens again. And, he has really, over the last 7 years, really helped me grow as a person and unlearn and learn.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
been everything from communicating, going from being seen and not heard to having a voice that is expected, respected, appreciated, wanted. I can communicate my wants and needs and desires. Hell, I didn't even know I had wants and needs and desires. So, like you
Yep.
said, it's that all of a sudden we're receiving permission. We're receiving acknowledgement like, I can do this. I
Mhm.
can change my mind. I can set boundaries and not feel guilty. I mean,
Mhm.
it is definitely a learned path of change, but it is so amazing when you start that journey. Like you said, having somebody to walk beside you, whether it's a partner, whether it's a friend, whether it's a coach, a therapist. I've done all those. I've had all those people. Um, and that's what led me to becoming a coach, as I'm sure that's probably what led you to becoming a coach.
Yeah. 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 You've got to think of it like as a brainwashing, like joining a cult. Like if you grow up in this, it is like with a narcissistic parent, it is a cult-like environment because they're the almighty and everybody's kowtowing to them because they're the end all be all. So it is a brainwashing. We're brainwashed and we're not going to see things with a clear perspective until we have that clear perspective kind of coming in and helping us kind of like turn our head and go, oh, oh, I see that now. So, and again, what's empowering, and I loved what you were saying about getting excited about the journey, is you start to see you have so many choices that you never knew were there. It's like you got these blinders on, and it's like it's either A or B, one extreme or the other. But no, there's all of these other things that begin to present themselves when you teach yourself how to start seeing other opportunities and possibilities. And like you said, Leanne, it's a journey. This is not something that happens overnight. I mean, it took me years to recover. I'm still
Yep.
recovering. Not, you know, I still have my struggles. They're a lot less, and I find them more interesting now. Like, oh, that's interesting. I had this moment of fear when I didn't answer the phone because my sweetheart called, and I thought to myself, "Oh, he's gonna think I'm cheating on him." I'm like, "Wait a minute. That's an ex-boyfriend right there." It's like it still comes up, but having the awareness now and going, "Oh, that's interesting. Like I don't have to buy into it. That there's the choice. You will still have the thoughts and they will become less with time as you get used to thinking and being a different way. But these things will come up, but you always have a choice to decide if you're going to buy into it or not. Am I really going to buy into him thinking I'm cheating on him because I didn't pick up the phone when he called? Or is that maybe not true and just something that I made up in my head that's an echo from the past? And So then I'm like, oh, I have a choice. I could buy into it or I could not buy into it. Well, I'm not going to buy into it because I know my partner isn't that partner. That was then, this is now. I have done nothing to make him think that. I am not doing that. So, so seeing the choices and that's what's empowering and in my life today is that I see I have a choice in every moment of every day. I can decide, am I going to buy into that or am I not going to buy into that? And I use it everywhere in my life. And it's very, very powerful. But we don't know how much power we really have when we have been taught to be powerless. And the victim mindset was something I really, really struggled with for a very, very long time, especially at the beginning of my journey when I was starting to have to acknowledge how I was victimized and abused as a child. But I was stuck there for a while, just believing that that was my fate and my story from now and forever. And that's, I didn't get very far. I didn't get very far with that perspective. And also what happened is, people were pulling away from me because my story got really tiring and old, and nobody knew how to fix me. So all they could say is, "Ooh, sorry that happened to you," and, kind of drift away. And I was like, but I'm the victim here. I'm the victim. And then I had to look at myself and go, am I using my victim story to get outside validation, compassion, attention, and then guiltily admit, well, maybe yes, I am to an extent. I am doing that, but I don't know how to not have this identity because now I've got this identity. So I had to work on building a new identity. Well, and changing my story, rewriting my story. Not that those things didn't happen to me, but that is, that is the epic human story, the epic human saga. We have the hero who overcomes the thing and perseveres. So I had to ask myself, am I going to overcome this and persevere? And what is persevering or, you know, uh, being successful or, recovering? What does that even look like? And how do I start being that way? And like I said, and we've been talking about in this conversation, it's this journey. And there's all these different parts of the journey, but it's always the same journey. And we go through it many times in our lives without even realizing it. But we can do this. We're supposed to do this. And this is how we develop our own character and our own identity.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of things that I want to go a little deeper in. One was choice, definitely a very powerful thing. And when you see what's possible, again, another reason I love what I'm doing. I love having this podcast. I love bringing on people like you to share their stories so that people can see what is possible. Um, because I also had the same experience where a lot of friends just pulled away. They just didn't want to be around it anymore. They didn't like him. They didn't like how he was treating me. They knew I wasn't going to leave. It didn't matter what they said or didn't say. I had my feet dug into the sand. And then you look back and you go, well, I wish somebody had told me. No, somebody did tell me. I'm sure multiple people did tell me. I just didn't want to hear it. I didn't. And so people would pull away. And then we go back into that mindset of proving ourselves to be that person that we were, that unlovable, not worthy, and you start taking it personally like this person doesn't want to talk to me because I am that person.
Right.
And so, it really is, it's doing the work. It's seeing who you can be, seeing what's possible. Um, Doing the introspection. I did also the one thing when you talked about when you're in a position where you feel safe, that was really the number one key for me, was being in a relationship for the first time in my life where I felt safe.
Hmm.
And when those things come up, those thoughts, those triggers, whatever, for me, it was when I first launched my coaching practice and I was leasing a space. And I pulled into my parking lot to go to work one day and my ex-husband's truck was in the parking lot. I immediately, full blown panic attack. He's figured out where I am. Of course he is. My name's on the door. Like, you can't miss it. It's on the sign outside. He's found me. He's going to be in there. He's going to be waiting for me when I walk in. And I didn't even get out of my car. Like, I rode through the parking lot, got out onto a residential street, pulled over, called my husband, explained what was going on. And I said, I'm just going home. I could already feel the anxiety, the panic bubbling inside of me. I was like, I just need to go home. And so I got home. I pulled in my driveway. I got out of the car. I came in the house. I locked the door. I sat down on my couch and I started asking myself those questions like, is this real? Did he follow me? Did he find me? I was in a large complex that had lots of businesses and lots of other reasons that he could have been in that building. There was like a
Hmm.
motor vehicle and there were CPAs and there were all kinds of different businesses. And I thought maybe it really has nothing to do with me at all.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then, sitting on my couch, like, is he knocking on my door? Is he out there with that sledgehammer he chased me with before? Or am I safe? I'm
Mm-hmm.
home. I'm in my safe space. Like, just the walk through the door felt like so much of that anxiety and panic just kind of melted away. And it gave me enough time and space to really self evaluate, like, is this real? Is this really happening to me? It was that fight or flight immediate reaction. But then I was like, okay, no, he's not following me. He's not standing outside.
Hmm.
I'm here. I'm safe. And after that first time that happened, it kind of started happening much more frequently and with ease. If some thought came up, I could take myself there to ask myself those questions.
Yeah.
And over time, they definitely got further and further away. And, but I still maintain those tools in my toolbox
Hmm.
that I learned, and I still carry them with me. They're always going to be with me. And I think that's the power that we have as we're learning to heal, is the different modalities that we pick up. Somatic practices, breathing, um, meditation for me was really big. Art therapy, just finding things that could get me out of a panic state
Hmm.
and into a place that brought me joy and comfort and peace and silence.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
knowing I have those with me all the time.
Yes. Well, and using them, like, and practicing using them on a regular basis. That's what helps us rewire our
Mhm.
brain, which when I say rewire, I'm talking about the neuroconnections in our brain. What fires together wires together. So we've got to start practicing different things consistently over time to reroute those brain connections so that that becomes the easier, faster, wired way of being. And something that you mentioned, Leanne, was about your safe space. And I think, I immediately thought when you're like, I'm in my safe space, I thought, well, that's your boundary area, right? You create a boundary for yourself. The boundary is your safe space. There's outside it and inside it. And I think, boundaries are really everything when we're learning to heal from abuse because we don't know we can have boundaries. We don't know what our boundaries are. And we've got to start tuning into like, well, what do I need to feel safe? How do I create safety for myself and how do I protect it? And you do need a safe space, a physical safe space, but then you also need a safe space up here. So boundaries are like, it's like the perimeter, like a fence, maybe, or like a limit or something. I also compare boundaries like a speed limit. It's like we've got to set limits with ourselves first. Then we can learn how to set limits with other people. But if you don't set a limit with yourself and you don't honor a limit with yourself, you're teaching yourself that your boundaries don't matter. And then you're not going to be able to set them with other people because they're going to cross them. And you're going to be like, well, I don't know what to do. I set a boundary, but they crossed it. So I can't do boundaries. Well, that's because we've got to learn how to do it with ourselves and we've got to take it, we've got to give it importance. We've got to make it valuable because we're teaching ourselves I matter and this is the limit that I'm setting for myself. Like, I'm not going to allow crazy into my space. This is my space and I decide who comes in here and I decide what happens here. And learning to say no, even to myself, like you did with with your fitness stuff. You had to learn how to set a limit with yourself. Like, I'm not going to exercise 24 hours a day. I'm not going to destroy my body in the process. So setting boundaries with yourself can be as simple as not answering that text message immediately or that phone call, or I'm going to get to bed at 9 o'clock tonight instead of scrolling until 2 a.m., right? I'm going, just starting to set limits with yourself. But the why is the reason you're doing it. You've got to know why you're doing it and remind yourself why you're doing it and then take the action and do it. Is it going to require effort? Yes. Is it going to be, is there going to be resistance? Yes. But just like anything, this is where the reparenting comes in, right? We've got to reparent ourselves. I've got to be the loving parent to say, no, honey, it's time for bed. Come on, let's go brush our teeth and get into bed because it's time for bed. And staying up until 2 a.m. is just going to disrupt your sleep pattern and make you late in the morning and grumpy, right? Like we're doing the good thing for ourselves. And when we start setting those limits and boundaries for ourselves, that's how we create safety because then we can start trusting ourselves. Like, hey, I can do this. I can take care of myself. I can do what's good for me. And this is a practice. We can change our boundaries. We could expand them. We can contract them. But that's also the process of learning who we are and what works for us and what doesn't.
Yeah. And that was like a magic word that I'd never heard before. Boundaries. I can set boundaries? And really starting with myself. Yeah, it was down to those simple things like making sure I was getting enough sleep, making sure I was, eating in a healthy manner, um, setting routines that help me stay consistent while I was, rebuilding that part of my life. Saying no when I was always in the habit of saying yes, no matter how busy I was, no matter how burnt out I was, instead of being that friend that everyone could count on because I never said no, was learning that I could say no, saying no, and holding that boundary and holding that boundary without guilt.
Yes. Yes.
And so once you start to develop those new skills, because
Mhm.
that's what they are. It's a brand new skill. I never had this before.
Right?
Once you start really developing those skills, they become easier. They become where you are living in your values.
Mhm.
And, then there's not guilt associated when you say no, or, when you're taking care of yourself, because you're doing it for you,
Mhm.
not for another person, but for you. And so, yeah, boundaries was quite huge in my healing process.
Yeah, me too. They weren't what I thought they were. So I had to kind of again unlearn what I thought I knew so I could learn the new thing, the new way. This journey is very humbling on so many levels, but it also teaches us forgiveness for ourselves and compassion for ourselves, which makes us able to demonstrate that more outside of ourselves as well, you know. Um, and for me, forgiveness is not condoning bad behavior. It's releasing myself from the anger or, the injustice of what happened. It's kind of it's more of a self-forgiveness. Like I can forgive myself and I can let this like I could release this energetically from my world. And it takes time, but the more you start to care about yourself and love yourself and realize, like you said, I'm doing this for me, the easier it becomes to let go of things that are outside of our power. And there's so much that we can't control. And I had to learn to stop trying to control everything. What people thought, how they felt, what was going to happen. Um, because I learned that I made things happen when I was a child. Like my mother would say, "Well, you made me angry." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I've got power over my mother's emotional state. So it's my job to make sure she's always happy." Again, you're a child. Your brain isn't even fully developed, okay? You don't know what you don't know. And we develop these beliefs at such a young age that we're not even aware we have them. So, learning what's in our control and what's not in our control is it is the greatest gift because I no longer have to worry about everybody else and everything else. All I need to focus on is what I have control over, which is what I think, how I feel to some extent, and what I choose to do. And I can adjust that. I can do something to help me feel better. I can think something to help me feel better. I could also do the opposite. I could do or think something to make me feel worse, right? So again, that's where your power of choice comes in, and that's what I used to do. But the new way now is like, okay, let's do something that is good for us, that's going to move us in the direction we want our life to go, instead of reenacting and recreating the past over and over and over again. And that's where the real change happens. That's the magic. And like you said, Leann, it's a ritual, it's a practice. And I would say, that ritual and that practice, the study, the ritual, the practice, every day, reminding myself every day, every morning before I go out into the world for the day, like, these are my values. This is what's important to me. I'm going to remember today that I can say no. I'm going to remember today that I'm not a victim and that I have choices. I'm going to remember today not to confuse what's actually happening right now with a trauma from the past. I'm going to remember today to take a deep breath when I feel my heart, exploding in my chest because I get triggered about something I might not even know what the trigger is. It could be a smell, it could be the song on the radio, it could be a look on someone's face, but I'm going to stay in my body. I'm not going to disassociate. I'm going to remember these things and I'm going to practice. And over time, what you practice becomes more second nature. This is how we learn how to master ourselves, our organism, you know. It's also, it's a body practice. It's a soul practice. It's a mindset practice. And that's how we can get well. And it's not, there's nothing special about me that I've been able to do this. Anybody can do this. You've done it. There are people everywhere who are doing this. So I just want to say again to people who are listening to this, there's hope. There is the promise of recovery is freedom, and it is there for you. But you do have to fight for your freedom. You got to break out of the old system
Yeah, and
because you're worth it.
I love that. I love that. I love it. You like answered my next question, which was going to be like, what are some first steps you recommend? I think you really nailed it on the head before we even got there. It's that starting your day, remembering you have a choice of who you are going to show up as. How are you going to react or not react to things? Who are you going to allow or not allow into your space? Um, and that you have a choice and you have the power to make those choices
Mhm.
and be aware of what you are doing and why you are doing it. And that in of itself is like a great first step. Every day we have to do something to remind us. And I'm still living there. And I think the best way I start my morning is with a really strong gratitude practice, and that is part of a routine that I have created for myself. Um, because I allow myself the time to wake up and just lay in bed and be thankful and, you know, give thought to how I want my day to go. And that's where I start it. I start it with a positive light. I don't start it with the alarm buzzer going off, or I have to jump out of bed. I have to hurry. I have to do this. I have to do this. No, this is what I have to do. I have to lay here and I have to breathe and I have to be present in this moment.
Mhm.
And I have to remind myself that I have choices
Mhm.
and what is my next choice.
Mhm.
And so yeah, those things they're so powerful in that journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to add in, noticing the words that we use too, right? You get to do those things. They're choices. You don't have to. You get to. You get to because they make your life better.
Yeah, I have that on a binder for when I first started my healing journey. But I
Mhm.
still see it's still physically present and I can see it as I get to.
Yeah, you get to. Yeah. There's so many, I mean, I've done this too, where I've sat there and I played with words and like I did with responsibility. Like words are so powerful, and we have this running commentary going in our head all of the time. So this is tied into becoming like aware of your thoughts, but also the language that we use. And if we can just make a shift with our language, it can change emotionally how we feel about whatever it is that we're thinking about, right? So changing have to get was a really big one for me. And I made it like my mission that I was just going to eliminate that word have to, or those two words have to, from my vocabulary. So I started changing the way I talked. And I would even change it I would correct myself in the middle of a sentence. I'd say, oh, well, I have to get to the bank. Oh, wait, I get to go to the bank today. And I didn't care who heard me correct myself, and I wouldn't even acknowledge I was correcting myself. But people started to notice and say, like, I just noticed, like, you're different. Like you just seem like you're just happy and like just so much more positive. And what I was doing was I was reprogramming my brain to think differently. And So when you notice the words coming out of your mouth, that's an insight as to what's going on behind the scenes there. So not that I'm picking on you, Leanne, for saying you have to, but that's just another part. Like there's just so many amazing things to discover on this journey and how being open to trying new things, the modalities, the practices, or a journaling practice or a correcting your words practice, how powerful the results are when you start making these little changes. A little change in your course, 6 months down the road, you're like in a completely different place.
Yep, absolutely. And I'll take that to, one level for me. Journaling was something that was a difficult modality for me to commit to. And a lot of that came from my childhood because growing up in that household where trust was an issue, that was one of the biggest triggers for my mom was she used to because when you're in middle school, you're writing notes to your friends. It's just what you do in middle school. It's what we
Mhm.
do in middle school. And so she would search me, whether when I would get home from school or in the morning before I would leave to school, or she'd search my bedroom to see if I had written a note to somebody and that I may be sharing what was happening within the house.
Mm,
And so it became this whole ordeal where it was like living as an inmate in a jail cell that she could come in at any time and flip my mattress and empty my drawers and search through my pockets and go through my books. And, she'd open up a textbook and she'd shake it to make sure nothing was going to fall out that I had maybe stuck in between. And so journaling was one of the early modalities that was suggested as a way to help. And that was physically painful. Like the whole concept of pen to paper would
hmm
immediately take me back to being a child. But I didn't want it to be something that kept me from doing that work. So instead, I asked my husband to buy me a laptop.
hmm
I said, I have no problems typing until the cows come home. Like I can type all my feelings, all my thoughts, everything. I just couldn't take a pen and write it in a journal.
hmm
And so I just had to find what worked for me. And that was with all my modalities.
Yeah.
Meditating, I had never meditated a day in my life because I always said I couldn't. Oh, I can't shut my mind down. My mind's too busy taking care of everybody else and what I need to do to stay safe and how to keep this person happy and, all those crazy thoughts. But once I reminded myself how important it was that I needed to at least try this modality, then I found how powerful it was and how much I truly enjoyed it and that I could control it and that it was one of those safety things. Like I used to remember coming out of a meditation practice and thanking my body for holding me in place while I took a journey
hmm
and just being like, wow, I never knew I could do this.
Yeah.
I never knew this was something that I would truly fall in love with and keep as a daily practice.
hmm
And so,
Yes.
like you said, just, you know, uh, making things a practice to where
hmm
they become second nature, like tying your shoes or driving a car.
hmm
Um, they're there for you.
Yes. Yeah. And you're right. It will feel uncomfortable at first. It will require effort. You will feel resistance. But like you said, it's like giving things a try, make modifications if you need to, right? Like just you're allowed to discover yourself and what works for you. And that's how you build yourself, your identity, who you are. It's a journey of discovery. And I always say this is a spiritual journey. You are rekindling your flame, your spirit and you are learning to feed your fire, your passion for life, your life. You're building yourself from the inside out, but you won't discover who you are if you're not willing to be with yourself and accept what is your truth, what works for you, what is important to you, what you value, what you want, what you need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what is one message that you want listeners to hear about hope, healing, and reclaiming their lives after narcissistic abuse?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I've mentioned it several times, and I think, when I first started my journey, I thought I was the only person in the world who had to cut her mother out of her life completely. I mean, again, one extreme to the other, right? I'm like, she's out, I'm done. I went no contact. But for me, that is what I needed to do. That was the boundary that I needed at that time. And to this day, I've considered changing it, but I always come back to, is that going to be better for me or worse? And I already know, because I know my mother and I know she won't change. She can't. But I accept that now. Wherever you are in your journey, however you decide to do your journey, do this journey. Do it. It will change your life for the better. And you will lose things along the way. It's okay to lose the relationships and the people who don't work for you anymore. The habits that don't work for you, the addictions that don't work for you. We've got to be willing to let go of what isn't working to make the space to bring in the things that do. Grief is a huge part of this process. There will be grief. There's already grief. Here's the thing that I realized on my journey. I thought by avoiding it, I was avoiding pain, but I wasn't, because I was living in pain all of the time and it would never end until I faced it and I worked through it. So you're worthy of this journey. And this is your epic, your hero's journey, your heroine's journey. This is your story. This is your life. And we've been talking about making choices. Make the choice. Choose you. Choose life. Your life. Because it does get better. It will get better. Get support. Start one step at a time. One step at a time. But if you don't know how to get started, we made a couple of small suggestions, but there's more. We do need other people to help us along the way, because the only people, if you grew up with a narcissistic parent or you were in a relationship where, this another person was your entire world, and you are literally taking in everything they're reflecting back at you, which is destroying you. We're brainwashed. We've got to get a second perspective. We've got to be able to start seeing other possibilities. So say yes to yourself. It doesn't have to get as bad for you as it did for me or you, Leann. It's like you have an opportunity every day to make choices. And what are you going to choose? That's, you know, this journey for me was really about growing up. I always felt like a child, even as an adult. I still felt like I was a little kid. And I can finally say now in my mid 50s, right? I'm about the same age as you are, Leanne, and happy birthday tomorrow. Um, I finally feel like a grown up. I finally don't, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid of life. I'm not afraid of people. I'm not afraid of what will happen. I'm at peace, and you can be too. You're worth this. Just just say yes. Say yes to yourself and start today. Do something today that's going to move you in that direction, and then do it again tomorrow.
And the next day, and the next day.
The next
Absolutely. I
day.
couldn't have said any of that better. That is absolutely perfect advice. Um, it's funny because I think about like my coaching practices, my one offering, my main offering is called Say Yes to Self.
Hmm.
And, I have a card, like a business card that I created that says, "Welcome to your term. Awaken your power within." This is your time. This is your story. You have the power to make this choice. You make this choice. You show up for yourself every day.
Mhm.
And I thought about the friend I was talking to you about earlier. Um, that's it. That's the place where she is at, is she has finally accepted herself, and she doesn't fear judgment. She's not living in the past. We both had some pretty rough childhoods. That's what brought us together. But still, as an adult going into her 50s, she was still thinking about, what would my grandmother say? What would and, we make choices and we have to acknowledge those choices, but they don't have to be what keeps us stuck anymore, because we
Yeah.
still have the power to choose different
Yes. Yes.
and to choose ourselves. And so, yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better. You covered everything so beautifully. Where can people find you? I want to make sure to cover everything in the show notes.
Yeah. Thank you. So you can find me, you can Google my name, Pi Venus Winslow. My website is fullvenusrising.com. Full Venus Rising is the name of my business and the community that I've created. You're not alone. There are thousands of people. Thousands of people subscribe to my email list, and I know, there are thousands of experts out there that are talking about this subject. Um, so you can find me at my website, you can find me on YouTube, you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Facebook. Um, I'm out there. There's a lot of places you can find me, but what I'd like to offer your listeners is a free copy, a free digital copy of my book, which is called Mother Medusa: Weaving Myth, Ritual, and Magic into Healing from a Narcissistic Upbringing. And it's a little more about me and my story. But I do talk about, the my experiences growing up with a narcissistic mother, how it affected me, and how I started my journey of healing. And again, it's that those rituals. And I call them rituals because it gives a sacredness to it. It's not like, oh, I've got to do my gratitude practice. I get to do my gratitude practice because this is a sacred and holy practice that I'm doing, because this is my spiritual journey and I want my spirit to soar. So that's what I talk about in the book. And when you sign up for that free digital copy, you get on my email list, and then you will get, more information, more tips, more strategies. You'll get invitations to workshops and events like this, where I speak about these things, other coaches, other events. And it's all here to help you on your journey. And like I said, if I'm even just a small gateway on your journey to help expose you to something else that changes your life, then that's why I do what I do, you know. And I know it's made a difference in the lives of thousands of people. me and you just having conversations like this. So thank you for having me, Leanne.
And thank you for, like I said, for sharing your story, for sharing your experiences, your journey, your sacred healing path. I definitely love the title of the book, uh, Weaving Myth and Ritual and Magic, because it is all those things. It is understanding, um, like we talked about real briefly in the beginning, how there's a lot of misconceptions about what a narcissist is. And I think as people are seeking and finding, they're finding different definitions, they're finding, different ways to describe it. And then they're turning to spending time like identifying people in their life as, oh, they're a nice narcissist. I need to cut them out, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. And so the more people that I can bring on the show that can share their knowledge, their experience, their understanding, the tools that they've used, um, that's why I do this, because I want to be that path for people to find good quality education and information that's available, put them in contact with people who, somebody may not connect with me, but they may connect great with you. And I am all about promoting that. I just want people to know that there are people out there
Mhm.
that have lived this experience, who have come out the other side, who are maybe still on their journey and still learning and still growing. But, we are here to walk beside you, to share your journey with you, to provide you education, information, resources, like you said, offering, sharing about other events that other educators have coming up, like we do. Cross promoting is so valuable for people because maybe they can't attend something we have during this week, but maybe there's something coming up that somebody that we know as a quality educator has coming up that may also resonate with them. So the more that we can do to collaborate as professionals, to um, come up on things like a podcast and share this information with people, um, that is what we can continue to do to put that information out there in the world of the internet. Because when we were going through it, when we were kids, we didn't have access to this information. Even when we started our healing journey, there just wasn't as much out there as there is now.
Yes. Yes.
So I just appreciate you. I appreciate your time and coming here and sharing that information.
I appreciate you too, Leanne. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thank you for being here. Your story is living proof that freedom and authenticity are possible even after decades of living under the control of a narcissistic parent. If this conversation resonated, please make sure that you understand that you are not alone, that healing is within your reach, that there are people out there that will walk beside you. To learn more about her work, check out her book, her coaching resources at fullvenusrising.com. I will include all the information, her YouTube channel, her social media platforms, all of the great places that you can find her and learn more about her will be included. There will also be a link to your wonderful free gift. Thank you for offering that to my audience. So that will be there. As always, thank you for tuning in to Happiness on Tap. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend. You never know who needs the encouragement. Leave us a review. It helps us bring more inspiring conversations your way. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you and I appreciate everything you do.
Thank you, Leanne.